Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Open Mic. Thrilled to have you here with us, watching, listening. Hope you're doing well after the Thanksgiving holidays. We have an interesting episode for you today. Mario Bueno, who grew up in Pontiac, Michigan, spent 20 years, almost 20 years in prison for murder. And I've been watching his videos and going through his website today. Fascinating story and background and all the good things he's doing to help Detroiters and Michiganders. I thought his story was ripe for this show, and I'm super excited to have Mario Bueno here with us today at Open Mic. So let's bring him on so he can tell you more.
You never know who you're going to see.
Be one guy one-on-one my whole career.
What you're going to hear.
Got a lot of desperate people in the city.
Or what they've got to say.
When you can take people inside of a crime.
That's what you're going to hear on my podcast, Open Mic. Find it where you find your podcasts.
Good morning, Mike. I appreciate it. I'm humbled by that introduction. Thank you.
Dude, I'm thrilled to have you here. I didn't know much about you, and we got your bio and reading through your book and your videos and your inspirational messages. I just think what a fascinating story that our viewers and listeners would love to hear about. Let me just cover a couple things in the sake of time. At age 12, you began selling drugs. At age 15, you began robbing drug dealers. At age 16, you were convicted of second-degree murder of a 27-year-old drug dealer. You were kicked out of 9 of the 16 Michigan prisons you spent time in for bad behavior. You spent almost 3 years in the hole, they call it, or in solitary confinement. You were let out in 2014. Do I have that about right?
Yep. January 22nd, 2014 will be a 7-year anniversary.
And you pled guilty to that murder?
No, actually, had I the character to accept responsibility for taking Samuel's life, I would have never took his life to begin with. So I had 2 trials. I served 365 days in solitary, age 16 in Oakland County Jail, fighting felony murder, armed robbery. Got to drop down to open murder. First trial was a hung jury. 6 said I was guilty, 6 said I wasn't. I had an alibi defense. I said I wasn't there. Even though I was interrogated many times, they charged my older cousin, which was dismissed. They offered me a deal after the hung jury. I could have told on my 18-year-old cousin or his friend, the 21-year-old who supplied the firearm. But I still, a hard head makes for a soft butt.
You maintained your innocence, and yet you were found guilty in the second trial?
Yeah, I was found guilty in the second trial. They basically the jury admitted that they thought I was there. They compromised on second-degree murder, and I was given 22 to 40 years. And honestly, at the time, I didn't understand what my father said on the phone when I was in prison. I had made it to general population. I had lost my faith at that time, but he said, "Son, you were saved. God did give you a second chance." And so I was given 22 to 40, which at 16, you can't fathom 12 months or 30 days, let alone 22 to 40 years. So hence the transitional turbulence, so to speak, for those first 10 years of my incarceration. I served 3 years in solitary before 22, and I was kicked out of 9 prisons. And I don't say that to impress anyone, but to impress upon them where I came and where I am now, which I'm sure we'll get into.
Well, I haven't read, I've just spent a couple hours on this morning, but it sounds like you now admit that you were involved in that murder.
Oh, no, yeah, absolutely. So I was convicted of the murder. And then, I went through the appeal process and finally it got to a point after about 7 years. I said, I'm done. I'm done trying to appeal it. I'm done. I'm not going to try to appeal anymore. Because I had some appealable issues. It was hearsay. There was not much evidence against me. I never admitted to it at the time. And so I at that time, I found some sense of closure by literally sitting down and writing a couple-page letter to the victim, which I sent to the prosecutor in Oakland County at the time, Mark Bilkovic, which I came to meet with him after I came home. But I sent him a letter around 7, 8 years maybe of my incarceration, 10 years maybe. And I said, could you make sure the victim's family gets this letter? And it was a letter accepting responsibility and apologizing and explaining that, had I had that if I had the character to accept responsibility at 16 and apologize, then I would have never done it to begin with. I lacked the character then.
Interesting.
And so at that time I let go of any appeal, and it was not only what I've learned in our criminal justice system. The stumbling block is it pits victim and perpetrator against each other in forever, invariably forever. But not only that, it prevents really the offender from truly owning up. And you can't really move forward unless you accept responsibility. And obviously the accountability is there. But if you don't truly accept responsibility and you're constantly looking out the window instead of in the mirror, then that's why we have an 87% recidivism rate within 9 years of an offender's release.
It's a really interesting juxtaposition. What we usually do on the show, I've been interviewing guys who've been incarcerated and ended up being innocent, truly innocent. You were incarcerated. It's refreshing to have somebody, take the responsibility. Said, yeah, I was dumb. I was an idiot. At 16 years old, I decided to rob this guy and shoot him. And I'll bet you that helped you with the parole board because you got out under your minimum sentence.
Well, so I laughed simply because, first and foremost, know this. I forgive myself for what I did, but I learned it's okay to mourn my victim. So what I do is, like me going in here and prepping this juvenile. I'm here in Highland Park, juvenile reentry spectrum, juvenile services, servicing juveniles for pre-release reentry and post-release. I don't do it for them. Right? I do it for my victim. So it's okay to mourn Samuel, and what I do is to prevent further Samuels. But why I laughed is because I'd be on the prison yard and I would say, yeah, right. Yeah, I'm the only one here guilty, right? Right? Because I would never hear anyone say they were guilty.
Right.
Well, so that's why I laugh. But it is. I think it's an essential component. The second, I think, ring in the wheel, so to speak, is the ability to truly convey to your victims how remorseful you are. Right, that restorative, right? That's restorative justice, and by the grace and the glory of God, not only was I able to convey that, but I actually, we'll get into, but the nonprofit that I co-founded, Luck Inc., where the problem becomes the solution, is peer mentors, leading the way for other high-risk population, peer mentoring. We got certified and trained in restorative justice. And my victim took part in that training.
Your victim,
my victim's girlfriend. You have many victims in a crime. If you kill someone, you probably have 1,000 victims. Because you killed a little piece of each and every person that loved that person.
So all of these things you're doing in the books and the training, we're definitely going to get into. But I'm fascinated by this process of 19 plus years in prison. I mean, you're 16-year-old in an adult prison. I can't imagine what that was like. But, when did you, for 7 years, you said to pen that letter. Take us through that process of that realization. And then for the next 13 or so years, are you, what was prison like now that you had admitted it? Were you trying to teach the other prisoners to, come to their truth? I'm very interested in that journey.
Absolutely. So it was a process, we got to start with on literally day 4 in solitary. I literally got on my knees, and I remembered a 10, 11, 12-year-old boy that used to pray to a God, right, to help him, to help his family who was hurting at the time. It was a lot of pain and a lot of trauma in my family, a lot of pain. Right, like when you say there's violence and anger and this and that, it's really just a lot of pain, So I get on my knees in day 4. True story. I'm in a cell in which there's no windows. Right, I'm charged with. I've been arraigned with felony murder, armed robbery. 16 years old. I was literally in South Beach, Miami the day I got locked up. And I came back and turned myself in. I didn't know there was a warrant out already. And then on day 4, I get on my knees and I'm crying. And I tell God, I said, if you would have heard me when I was 10, 11, 12, this wouldn't have happened. And I said, I challenge you, if you save me, I'll spend the rest of my life helping men like myself. And so I crawled myself up on the mat, cried. It's a dim light. There's no clock, obviously. So you lose your sense of time in solitary. And so I wake up to a loud, and I jump and I turn around, and it was this old sheriff that was talking to me for the first 3 days. The first 3 days they had me out there in like a fish tank type thing where they could watch me the entire time. And I didn't really know it at the time, but that's just policy. If anyone charged with such a crime is put on suicide watch, because I mean, who would want to kill themselves? So by day 4, they seen that I was stable, and he was an older guy. He was like a grandpa kind of guy that kept on talking to me all day, and he was nurturing me. He showed a lot of humanity, and so I see him walking away, and I look on the ground, and it was a Bible. Now, mind you, I went to Catholic school, but we don't read the Bible. That was a joke. So, I looked at the Bible, and I crawled to my knees, literally, and I looked up to the heavens, literally, in a cell, and I said, I take this as confirmation, right? I take this as confirmation. That week, unbeknownst to me, my mom had asked a deacon from Prince of Peace Catholic Church by where she lives to come and visit me. So they allowed clergy. I wasn't allowed contact visits with my family. The judge ordered that I be placed in Oakland County Jail. Even though I had no record, they should have put me in the juvenile facility according to their own policy. But guess what? I needed to be broken, literally, and put back together, right? So it was good that I was put in solitary, because I didn't have contact visits. I didn't have all that nurturing and soft stuff. It was all hard. It was the most extreme form of confinement that exists in the United States of America, from South Beach, Miami to boom.
Was that the worst year out of the 20?
Yeah. That was the worst year. Anytime you're in a county jail, it's way worse than prison, let alone solitary confinement. And they had to do that because I was a juvenile that was automatically waived as an adult. However, I hadn't been convicted and sentenced yet. So they had to protect. It was for my protection. Even though I was begging them to please put me in a 10-man bullpen so I could use the phone and take a shower. Instead of they didn't have time. They'd take me out of my cell every couple of days for a phone call and a shower. You know what I'm saying? So it was extreme conditions for a 16-year-old.
Jeez.
And questionably, whether it was humane. I mean, obviously it's not humane for a person, but we should question our practices. So anyways, it was in that space, right? My Uncle Johnny, he was a city councilman of Pontiac at the time, and his best friend was Captain Jones, who's like the sheriff of probably Royal Oak or something. I don't know. This is like 25 years later, right? But what he allowed was for my uncle to come in and visit me and contact in the attorney booth, and my uncle would bring me big bags of college books that my dad was sending. So at 16, I was in there being trained by a deacon every Saturday on the story of Job. Back to the deacon. He comes in that week and hands me a book and says, I'm going to give you a reading assignment, and every Saturday I'm going to come and we're going to talk about Job and Job's suffering. And so, and I'm reading college textbooks and studying, and I'm committed. And I had a transformation of heart. I read the Bible. That Bible that was thrown on the ground, I read it 3 times in solitary. In 365 days, I read it 3 times. And I would cry because I didn't know these concepts. Like, blessed is he who stands and not in the way of sinners, right? Like, I didn't, like, so I would be crying and saying, well, why didn't you tell me this before? And so what I didn't understand was that my heart had been transformed, but yet my giftings and my skill set haven't manifested yet. And so God did make good on his promise. So I stopped. When I got found guilty, I stopped praying for anything specific. I was scared to my faith. I didn't lose my faith. I was angry. I was angry because I knew I deserved it, but I was angry because I thought God abandoned me again, and I knew I had a change of heart. My heart was transformed in that year, literally. But guess what? There's an old saying that even though Jesus might be in your heart, your granddaddy's in your bones. Right?
That's
So what
like
that means
it
is,
took a few years to really have it sink in, it sounds like.
well, I was saved from the streets, but the streets were still inside me.
Mhm.
I was removed from the street, but the street was still inside me. But guess what? That's exactly what saved me, though. Do you understand what I'm saying? So the anger and the skill set and the aggression and the violence that I had that led me and landed me in prison is exactly the skills that saved me and allowed me to excel in a hyper aggressive sociopathic environment. There's a video that was recently released about some research done by a professor, and he said that juveniles that are placed in, I'm a published McNair scholar, and I'm not trying to brag to you, but the thesis that I did is titled adolescents convicted and housed with adult offenders, the consequences and implications thereof, right? So what I did was I measured, juvenile offenders that were housed with adults, and then seeing how they responded to the world around them out at once post release. So what this professor said in his video was that juveniles that are housed with adult offenders, the environment is very hard to describe, right? It's very hard to describe. You go on tours. There's plenty of tours, but these tours are like dog and pony shows. You know that, right? Like you go on a prison tour, it's a dog and pony show, right? Like I don't care if the inspector general's coming in. Like we already know 3 weeks in advance, because guess who's cleaning everything and getting everything prepped? Like we all know. Like if a convict knows, you know what I'm saying? Everybody knows.
Sure.
So anyways, so what he said was that in order for a youthful offender to survive an adult correctional facility, that's what we call them today, right? They have to become conscious sociopaths in order to survive. Meaning, like, in order to save their soul, so to speak, right? Like you have to be able to meet the level of violence and aggression, and then take it a couple notches up. Wow. But be conscious all the while. So the question is, well, how'd you do that, Mario? I didn't. It was my family that did it. Like my mother that said I would like literally when I was being fingerprinted and my mom was taking my necklace off me at Pontiac Police Station. Now it's, the Pontiac Police don't exist in this Oakland County Sheriff Station, but it was the Pontiac Police Station. They let her come back there with my attorney, Jerome Sabota. Real good dude, man. Real good dude. And he and she's taking the necklace off, and literally it was like a really deep moment. While she's taking my beaded necklace off, the silver cross on it just falls, and I'm literally being fingerprinted at the same time, and all you hear is ding, ding, and all these beads fall everywhere, right? And she whispers, she's crying profusely, like, understand something. My mom, she had challenges, and man, look, I have a 4.5-year-old. Let me tell you, you stop judging your own parents once you have a kid, right? But one thing for sure, she was always there for me. So she whispered in my ear, she says, I'll never leave you or forsake you. Like my mom would visit me wherever I went. My father, he said, I won't pay for your attorney, son, because I don't believe in what you did. Because I was honest with him. I conveyed to him. I was always honest with him, no matter how ugly the truth was.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had lost respect for my parents at an early age, and that's a dangerous thing. It's a dangerous thing. So they visited me the whole time, which prevented me from losing my own humanity. I had the stick and the carrot. And the problem is that all we do is give these people the stick. We don't realize what we're actually conditioning, shaping, forming, and creating. and these docile bodies that are in hyper aggressive environments that come home to lack of a good shelter and food and transportation, and honestly a meaningful opportunity and employment. So it was that really maintained my sense of self, that I was able to protect myself but not lose myself.
Fascinating. So wow. I mean, there's so much here. There's so much to unpack. I mean, I mean, 20 years in, you're in. I mean, you're talking about your thesis in college, and you co-founded Luck Inc. You're an author of 2 books: Reformed, Memoir of a Juvenile Killer, and the workbook that you showed me earlier, Never Going Back.
Never Going Back.
Which we're going to talk about.
A trauma-informed guide for successful reentry. I wrote it during this pandemic. It was sitting on my laptop for a couple years, and I'll be honest with you, I finally got to it, and I put everything I wish I would have known before I came home. Everything I wish I would have known, and so I was literally telling my wife, who being an author, boy, look, let me tell you something. The ones closest to you will be your biggest critics, right? So I would tell my wife that I was going to cut grass at like $8 to $10 an hour because I couldn't get it. With all due respect, I have an accounting degree from Wayne State. I'm finishing my master's degree at University of Michigan. Like, I've been appointed by the House of Representatives. I've been appointed by the city of Detroit. I started a nonprofit which brought in 4 government contracts, and I hired a team of 12 men to perform prisoner reentry in the most violent city in America right now. And I can't get a job as an Uber driver or Costco or Taco Bell. Period. So right now, like, there's 2,400 parolees in Detroit at any given point in time, and 75% are unemployed. There's 8,400 felony probationers in the city of Detroit at any point in time, with 45% unemployed. Think about that, right? So I couldn't get a job, man. I resigned from the city of Detroit because I remember why I was here, and so I could, I jumped with no net. I jumped with no net because with all due respect, I'm not a leader. I'm a shepherd.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that. If you're starting your own organization and writing 2 books and hiring people, are these parolees that these are people with records that you hired?
No, the guy. Well, first of all, I'm a co-founder. It's Rick Speck, Cameron Coates, and myself. But then there's a couple other guys that Lou Cibarra, Brian Jones. We were the team at Jackson Prison. We were called the Peacemakers. That Governor Snyder shut the whole prison down to come and meet us because he wanted to know how was it 30 prisoners were teaching peace and how to resolve conflict pro-socially to a 1,600 man prison yard for free. Like, this is what so I wasn't let go early. I was given my good time back that I lost from being kicked out of 9 prisons, because I was teaching 3 classes of 17 to 25-year-old violent offenders how to resolve internal, right, and invariably external conflict. There's an old African proverb that says, when there exists no enemy within, the enemy outside can do you no harm. And so that's what my process was. When we were talking earlier, you were saying, well, how, were you teaching guys inside? So it was a process of becoming. So I stopped praying for a release. When I got convicted and gave him all those years, the only thing I prayed for was wisdom and understanding and strength. Every day I cried and begged God basically for that. I became angry, but I kept reading profusely. Like my dad paid for me to get an associate's degree through Ohio University's correspondence program for the incarcerated. Even in prison, if you don't got money, it's gonna be highly challenged. And even if you don't have an education, with my associate's degree, they put me at the top of the list as far as the highest paying jobs, just in prison. So I was becoming that constantly. And so for example, in 2007, it was actually the prison. That was the time when I wrote the letter to my victim. The special activities director at that prison, Riverside Correctional Facility, asked that myself and a mentor of mine, Antonio Esprit, he was a juvenile lifer. He's home now after serving 35 years. She asked that we teach the young prison population conflict resolution, right? And we did it effectively. And so one day, the administration and the administrators were walking through, and they seen the class. And I mean, you're talking about it. This was back when I was only like 27 years old. I had been in prison about 11 years. And looking back now, I seen why they were afraid. It's like the old adage, teach a slave anything but to read. It's very dangerous for prisoners to have influence over a lot of prisoners, And so they actually cut the class, and a couple years later down the line, I went in there to speak to my case manager. She pulled my file out, and I seen a letter on the very top, and it said, "Do not allow prisoner to teach other prisoners." And this was in 2009, possibly eight or nine. So in late 2011, late, like December, around those holidays, I got kicked out of my last prison, and I got to Jackson Cooper Street.
Why'd you get kicked out there? Because you were why?
I was selling. I was selling tobacco and doing things that I should. I was always trying to find a way to make $1 out of 15 cents, like Tupac said. Okay. I'd rationalize and justify my criminal behavior.
But it wasn't violent stuff. It was making money stuff.
Oh yeah, no. I was always making money stuff, but making money stuff always brings violence. Mind you, I always had the potential to become violent, but I was never a predator and preyed on. So this leads somewhere. So the criminal mind looks at the drug dealer and the robber and like a guy like me as being at the top of the food chain, right? So I'm walking. This is the criminal mind. This is what Look at all the movies we look at. Now, this isn't necessarily like the average person, the layman that just watches movies. They would technically speaking, for the most part, until we're about to get in this question in this conversation, they would look at a guy like me as above and beyond morally, if there is such a word in this little schism that we're putting together.
Conversation,
right? I would be morally more. I would be higher in terms of my ethics and morality than a pedophile.
Okay,
let's say, generally speaking, in our culture today,
if we're ranking the criminal mind,
ranking the criminality, right?
I agree with you.
But see, I don't.
Okay,
I'm not asserting as such. You're agreeing with me that's what the public's eye, so to speak, or social acceptance, right? So I'm walking the prison yard with a buddy of mine. So my book, Reform, Memoir of a Juvenile Killer, I put a stop to the print. I got a contract for the book, but I didn't agree on the title. The original title was Broken, God's Transformative Power Through Pain and Purpose. And so when I sat down, they wanted me to not only change the title, but take God out of the book. So literally, true story, I told the guy at the table, I said, look, man, if you want God, a book without God, I said, you write it. I said, truth is, if God went in this book, you and a couple people at this table probably be in the trunk right now, and I see how much money he got. I said, for real. So he's like, whoa, Mario, I'm telling you, the whole company went bankrupt, but I stopped the print of the book and did all that because it's not my vision. My point is this. In the book, I detail a pivotal moment in my paradigm shift. So I was at Carson City Crush facility. This is like 2009, 10. Yeah, about 2009. And I'm walking the prison yard talking. I was getting the Investors Business Daily and we were trading stocks, doing, I was studying technical analysis. I was talking with a buddy of mine named Dwight Henley. He was in the 700 club. He used to squat 700, big white guy. But he's the one that really influenced me into studying through Ohio University because he was. I still talk to him to this day. He's still locked up. He got locked up. He got caught with a kilo and a body in the trunk. But I think he got one of them reversed. I don't know the details. You don't ask questions. So anyways,
Interesting friends you have here. All right, like keep going.
So I get kicked out of my housing unit because they come out with a memo saying they're taking all tobacco from the prison over a 12-month period. And it's going to be a step down, kind of like the boiled frog syndrome. You don't notice the gradual increase in temperature, right? So what do? I don't smoke. So what I do, I go to the yard and buy all the tobacco in the prison yard. I went to all the bookies because they got tickets and stuff. And so I bought all the tobacco. It's supply and demand, economics 101, right? So I buy all the tobacco, and mind you, 6 months later, like a little $1.50 bugler pouch is now going for like $70.
Wow.
Yeah, and I got like hundreds of them. So long story short, my naivety, ignorance is bliss. So, the government can do whatever they want. So the 11th month, when tobacco was still legit, they come out with the internal memo that says anyone who's hoarding tobacco, confiscated, right? So of course they seize all my stuff. I'm up front with the warrant. I'm cuffed. He's like, Mario, I listen to your phone calls. You sound like you could be potentially a CEO of your own company. I listen to you talk to people on the phone, but you're on the fence. So I get kicked out of the housing unit for running poker tables, for running. I would run stores. You give guy 2 items, he gives you 3 back. I just have money. It's finance. I mean, what do you want me to do, man? You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, so I'm just making money work for me. So, but I would never do violence to get the money from the people. But unfortunately, then they would, write kites on you, tell on you, stuff like that. So they kicked me out the housing unit, and I'm walking the prison yard with Dwight Hemming. And Dwight says, Mario, now mind you, at the time I was just finishing my associates. Literally, I had 5 classes that I was taking to finish my associate's degree, 60 credits, and that's because I remember that because the inspector threatened, because if you get on STG, security threat group, as a gang member, I was never in a gang, but I was very influential, and he was trying to squeeze me for information. He threatened to put me on STG, and I would be disallowed from my classes, and so I would lose, miss out on $3,000. But anyways, he says, Mario, I'm concerned. I'm concerned that if you continue with this way of thinking, now mind you, this is a guy who's doing natural life. All he does is work out, teach other prisoners, like like for example, the stock market, and studying and whatnot. He's just a very positive person. He's made a bunch of money for his mother, who's helping him, and he's taking care of his mom through investments. So he says, I'm concerned that if you continue with this way of behavior, Mario, you become a sociopath. And I start laughing. And I look, he goes, I'm serious, Mario. I said, get the F out of here, man. I said, Dwight. I mean, he's a buddy of mine. I said, sociopath. I said, for what? For running poker tables, man? He's like, Mario, I'm telling you. He said, Mario, he stops me and he puts his hands on my shoulders, and it's sunny out. I remember this. And he says, Mario, close your eyes. He says, pretend you have a daughter. Now, mind you, I have a 4.5-year-old daughter now. Only child now, but back then I didn't have a child, obviously. I said, all right. He said, pretend you have a daughter. He says, now you have to make a choice. I said, all right. He said, you have to choose for her to either get raped or killed right now. Right now, you have to choose. What do you choose? So then I literally take my sunglasses off and I look at him. And I said, I'm a piece of shit, huh? He said, why? I said, because I took any opportunity for my victim to recover. He said, now you got it. And it hit me. It was a paradigm shift like no other. It was like literally at that moment, I realized like what kind of piece of POS I was, and I wanted forever to prevent that. And it was just another moment in my life to where, it's your belief systems shape your thinking, but it's cyclical. Like it all goes back, like what you believe in invariably. I mean, whether you want to speak like, we're talking theology or we're talking the social side, like self-fulfilling prophecy, social sciences. Invariably, what you believe and what you think and what you say and what you do it's a cycle. And if you can shift the belief system, you can literally shift the cycle.
So Mario, I understand that analogy. I don't understand though, in the context of what you were doing. What did I understand the analogy? What did you change after that realization?
Well, what I changed was the way I judged, for example, the sex offenders and the way I viewed myself. I used to see myself as top of the food chain. And now I see myself at the bottom.
Just in that moment. Just in that moment.
At that very moment. At that very moment. You got to realize something. Like, I was very influential in prison. And that's the reason why we'll talk later on. Like, when I got to Jackson Prison, they pulled me in that program where I was teaching, Rick Speck, a buddy of mine who I knew 10 years earlier. This guy did 15 years for impersonating a DEA agent and robbing high-level stash houses. 10 years later, after I'd helped him when he first came into the state prison, 10 years later, he's the chairman of this organization. He pulls me in to train me and to teach other prisoners. But at that very moment, literally, I stopped seeing myself at the top of the food chain and I started seeing myself at really what I was. Like the wool was removed from my eyes. Like when you take a life, you take any opportunity for restoration to ever come to. And that's something that I forgive myself, but I mourn my victim every day. And that's the reason why I'm across the street right now about to go visit with a juvenile prison.
All right, Mario, I know you're going around to schools and organizations and you're doing motivational speeches that people can find on your website, MarioBo.expert.com. We're going to have all the links in our show notes and everything like that. If people want to, watch more of your stuff and get your books. But I'm curious, in the last few minutes we have together, what are you doing right now to help Detroiters, Michiganders in your organizations?
Well, right now I'm actually, like I said, I just pulled up to the Lincoln Spectrum Services to try to engage a client pre-release, prep them mentally, emotionally for what they have to expect. I'm also working for the Youth Justice Fund. I'm contracted for them as a community engagement coordinator. They're centered in Washtenaw County and Ypsilanti. What we're doing is servicing juvenile lifers who are returning back into the community. In addition, we are also servicing juveniles adjudicated since I've been helping out with this juvenile reentry in Michigan Public Health Institute's contracting. So I'm wearing a few different hats. Luck Inc. We're doing the housing right now. We've got two mentees that we've mentored through his parole. One did a 4-year parole after serving 43 years in prison. Just finished a 4-year parole. We have a multi-unit, and that's the nonprofit that I had started. Just literally servicing them on I'm meeting guys where they are, and I'm trying to guide them where they need to be. So, for example, tomorrow morning, I have two sessions with clients that are being housed in a juvenile facility in Clinton Township. And so with these clients, I'll take each one out individually. They actually are allowed to go out with me, and I'll take them to eat, and we'll sit and talk, and we strategize. We first and foremost, see what they want to do, what their passion is, what their thoughts are. Each client is unique, And then, for example, on the other extreme, I have a client who is in his 60s who served 43 years in prison, who we are moving into the Luck House in the next week or two. So it's a spectrum that is extremely wide. It's extremely overwhelming, and at times disheartening when you see the amount of need and the lack of resources in terms of reentry. We as a society, we do a lot of I call it's the front end of the criminal justice system. We put a lot of emphasis on the front end. That is obviously the investigating, the arresting, the prosecuting, and the sentencing, and the incarceration. But as far as the back end, when we understand that 95% of all offenders are released, 95%, what that does is it positions us to now have now we're a huge stakeholder in the product that our Michigan Department of Corrections is producing. Whether we know it or not, like ignorance is bliss once again, whether we know it or not, the one who is drying your car off at your if you go wherever Jack's car wash, or the one who is putting a ticket in your window when you park at the Tigers game, or when you go to the LCA arena to a concert, right? You have to understand that what we are doing is throwing a pebble into a pond, and there's a ripple effect. And you can't just buy your way out of this criminal justice dilemma that we have dug ourselves into. And what I mean by that is gated communities. You can't. How long are you gonna stay in your gated community, right? Who's going crazy over this pandemic, right? Yeah, no. We all come out. We all socialize. We are interconnected. So it's in our best interest as the major stakeholders that are literally creating a product. It's in our best interest to understand what that product is. And that honestly, like right now, for example, last night I had government and nonprofit finance 560, a master's class, right? Killing me, right? But we talked about efficiency, like the efficiency ratios, like what are we getting for our dollar? Like we're spending $2.2 billion for the Michigan Department of Corrections. We're spending $123 million on reentry.
Not good. It's fascinating. I love the holistic approach that you take. I have some friends that I've met through open mic and that have been exonerated, as I told you earlier, for crimes that they were convicted of that they didn't commit. And they talk to me about how there's, it's interesting. There's, if you're a parolee, there are some government programs. There are people like you who will come and coach and consult them, and they talk about housing and jobs. If you're exonerated for a crime you didn't commit, you get nothing. There are no benefits. The government will not pay for someone amazing like you to come coach them. Did you know that there was that difference?
Not only do I know that difference, I know, like, in our plight to ban the juvenile life without parole, right, sentences, and our plight to do that was a sit down conversation with like, I was working for the House of Representatives at the time, but it was a sit down conversation with the understanding, and I had to convey to the juveniles that were locked up, we don't want you discharged in the courtroom. We want you to have at least a year parole, so you can be eligible for resources. So absolutely, I'm aware of that. Not only that, I'm literally in the parking lot at a juvenile facility. It's a prison. Serendipitously, I used to come for free 3 years ago on Sundays when I was asked by this guy who had a reentry program, which him nor none of his team had ever reentered anything in terms of criminal justice. So that's one of the dilemmas we have is who's the service providers, that are getting these resources, and where are they going? But anyways, I used to come to this very prison for free, right? And I would literally max out my credit card. I was going to Wayne State University at the time. I'd max out my credit card to buy, for example, if I was coming and I knew the group was 20, there's usually 20 guys. I'd buy 20 Think and Grow Rich, or I'd buy 20 As a Man Thinketh. And that's what I would start my mentees out with. And so literally one of my clients, my first client, under my transformational training LLC and services fee for services for Michigan Public Health Institute, one of my first clients, which is their client, was housed here. And so I was able to mentor him for like 3 months before he got out, thank God. And mind you, he got out because they ruled that it's called the blended sentence. So at 21, they released him, but he was locked up since the age of 14. Released at 21. They released him. The DHHS worker, basically a probation parole officer, had to sign his documents to release him at the gate, closing his DHHS file. Now, mind you, check this out, Mike. What that does is it negates the opportunity to receive resources from anyone.
Interesting.
So we got so this is and guess what? This only happens to those with the most serious offenses because all the other offenses get out when they're 19 or 18. But when you got a murder case from at age 13 or 14, or guess what? Like my client had, which was a aggravated sexual assault at age 14 while he's smoking crack with his older brother and he rapes his older brother's girlfriend. Right? When you got that, you're locked up from 14 to 21. So 7 years. And because they deem you as not a threat and you should be released, we're going to release you. But guess what? So Youth Justice Fund, my boss and professor at U of M, Aaron Kinzel, he's also executive director at Youth Justice Fund. I'm contracted there, just a 12-month contract as a contractor. But he literally, when he heard about this is when he shifted the services for Youth Justice Fund for not just juvenile lifers, which Youth Justice Fund was started by Deborah LaBelle, who was the lead attorney on the ACLU, who got the juvenile lifer law in Michigan, basically thrown out. And so she started this Youth Justice Fund when she's seen the depravity and the lack and the gap of resources for the juvenile lifers that were coming home after 40-something years in prison with nothing. And then the housing that they do have, it's punitive in nature just because you're poor. You know what I'm saying? Like the way they treat you, right? Once again, the back end of corrections. We should be very concerned. We should be very concerned with the fact that the conditions of our prisons are the culture that exists there. It mirrors and parallels that of the streets. Like you have a few, like out of the 30, probably they say there's like 37 prisons now, but I mean, you turn 2 prisons into one by firing the entire administration in one prison and you consolidate. That's not like closing a prison. You still got those prisoners, right? So we got like 37 prisons, right? So out of those 37 prisons, you probably got maybe 2 or 3 that have a culture that is somewhat pro-social. Like the staff and the prisoners behave themselves for the most part. But by and large, the culture that exists within these housing units, like for example, the reason why we were able to affect so much change at Jackson Cooper Street was because after I was pulled into this program and trained and trained in critical thinking, effective communication, servant leadership, and once I got through all that, ethical reasoning, I got trained and certified as a mediator. Then I got trained as a facilitator. When I started teaching my own cohort of 17 and 25-year-olds, the deputy warden called Rick, my buddy Rick, and I into his office and said, "I'm not getting the numbers I want with these youngsters." And I had just articulated this to Rick just a couple days before that, sitting in our cube. It was an 8-man cube. The deputy warden would put high level 17, 18, 19-year-olds in our cube, and we would mentor them because you become like the ones you're around the most. So the law of association, right? So we're sitting there and we're talking. I said, we're never going to affect change like we want to. And he said, "Why do you say that?" And I explained it to him. And so when the deputy warden made that statement, he's not getting the numbers he wants. I told him this, what I had told Rick a couple days earlier. I said, "Of course you're not." And he said, "Why is that?" I said, "Dep." I call him Dep. I said, "Dep." I said, you give them to us for 5 hours a week in a classroom in the school building. I said, but there's 168 hours in a week. So for 163 hours, they go back into an environment that doesn't respect the rules of engagement that we're trying to teach them. Like they learn the theory in the classroom, but going into an environment and can't have the application. So he's like, "Well, so what do you need?" I said, "We need our own housing unit." He said, "Your own what?" I said, "Our own housing unit." I said, "With all due respect, the housing unit has the program participants in which we teach throughout this whole prison yard. They will live in this housing unit, and we'll have a core member in every cube." I said, and they'll sign a level of expectations. I said, no offense, that are above and beyond that of the Michigan Department of Corrections. I said, once again, no offense. And he's just looking at me. And he's looking at me and Rick. He said, it was this black dude. I call him Unc now. You know, he didn't want me there. Rick had to beg him to keep me there when I got there. Because Rick, literally, true story, Rick told him, he said, Dep, I got the perfect guy for our 17 to 25-year-old pilot program. He goes, he's perfect. He's got influence. He's bilingual. He's Spanish. Look, he's been locked up since he was 16. He's highly educated. He's like, oh yeah, who? He said, Mario Bueno. He said, oh, hell no. He said, oh, hell. And literally my file, I had 2 files like this high. He said, hell no. He goes, I had just got there the day before. He goes, these are his files right here. He said, tell that mother heifer. He goes, tell him don't even unpack. Tell him he's not going to be here long. And Rick said, Dep, I'm telling you. He says, I've never asked. He goes, Dep, I've never asked you for anything. He said, I've been here for 3 years running this program. I've been your block representative. I've been doing this. He goes, I've never asked you for anything. I'm asking you, give me a shot with him. Because him and I were good friends 10 years earlier. I hadn't seen him or heard from him in ages because they stopped allowing prisoners from communicating from prison to prison. And so it was from that. So literally, he said, you got it. He said, you got it. And that deputy warden was one of our first board of directors out here because he had retired after 30 years. And he was one of our first board of directors on Lucking. So he gave us the housing unit. The guy signed the level of expectations. And what ensued and what was created and designed was a culture that was pro-social. So our students not only learned principles, but guess what? It wasn't that there was no fights in here. But instead of being every other housing unit where everyone's geeking the fight to go on and they're trying to look for police, these men broke the fight up. And then these men had to sit down and talk about how they felt and why they fought. So then we would have and then if a police walked in, we'd stop talking. They weren't allowed because they were confidential. We're certified mediators through Jackson Resolution Center.
Wow.
So we'd have 2 grown men, one with a black eye, the other one with a broken nose, crying, talking about, I thought you didn't like me. I thought you just didn't like me.
Listen, Mario, I know you. I don't want you to be late for your appointment, but let me just tell you, I've done 70 podcasts. I don't think I've ever let somebody just talk and talk and talk. But your energy and your message and your stories are so damn infectious and good and meaningful and powerful. Like I'm blown away by you, man. And I commend you for, I mean, everything you're doing and everything that you learned in prison and how you're paying it back times a million. And I smell a movie coming out of this for somehow one day with your life story in it and all the people that you're helping and how lucky this kid is that you're going to see right now to coach and mentor to get them back on their feet, and your entrepreneurial spirit and your vision and all the things that you've learned, self-taught, a lot of them. Yes, you went through college. Yes, you've taken a lot of classes and have mentors. I'm not saying you did this all on your own, but the wisdom that you've gained, through the 19 plus years in prison and how you're paying it back. I'm blown away by you. I'm blown away.
I'm humbled by it. And I just want to tell you this, that, I'm one of those who literally defines ego as edging God out. And in my book, I transform the Hebrew translation of God means the source. There has to be a source of everything. Origination, right? There's a source. And literally, I'm one that just is an example of we are designed to succeed, right? That's the message that I bring to these young men. And when we understand that when we're designed to succeed and we get in tune with ourselves, that we understand that it's relationship with self, the loving of self, that allows us to love others, right? Hurt people hurt others. Okay? Hurt people, right? So literally, I appreciate that, but I want to stress that not only was it God, but God utilizing so many components so many different variables, so many different relationships with so many good people, right? That I'm not a embittered ex-prisoner, right? Mind you, my very transformation came by way of those also working in the prison system. It was the dismantling of the us versus them paradigm and belief system that was so dysfunctional through relationships with those that worked in the Department of Corrections. So not only, was it obviously, a drive and a passion for bettering oneself, but I couldn't have did it without the numerous individuals that have poured into me. So I thank you, Mike, and I thank you, and I thank you.
Well, listen, what an honor to talk to you. Keep up the good work. If there's anything that I can do for you, you have my contact information out. Please reach out. I'm hoping when this damn COVID stuff's over, we get to meet in person, and maybe we'll do another episode, or get our people together, my new friends and your friends, and we'll get people together and help, because I this hole that's in our system when people get out for whatever reason, if they're wrongfully incarcerated or they're out on parole, and the services have to be better. They have to spend a lot more of that percentage of those billions on rehabilitating people and having people like you and people that you train to coach and mentor and teach. I can see such a better world for these people with the right resources and the right guidance. So, anything I can do, please reach out. Thank you for being on Open Mic, and go do your God's work. Go do God's work with where you're sitting in the parking lot right now. And I look forward to talking to you in the future.
Yeah, yes, sir, I will. God bless you and take care. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. God bless you. Thank you. Mario Bueno, fascinating podcast. I wasn't kidding. If you've watched these, listened to these, you know that I usually jump in more and ask more questions, but there was something about the way he talked and the messaging that he delivered that I just wanted to hear him talk, and that's good. I try to listen more and talk less, and I think I accomplished that in today's episode. So if you know somebody who would be moved by this message, please forward them the podcast, comment here, contact Mario in the links below, buy his book, help out where you can. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our podcast, please, and like us and the episode, and we'll see you next time on Open Mic.